Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a chat about the F-18. If you don't know what the F-18 is, it's an incredible, powerful vehicle that is for the United States. The Hornet is its general nickname, and the reason we're talking about it today is because, first of all, it was in that leak list, but I'm kind of dubious about some of the things on that leak list, so I wouldn't put too much stock into it. But also the simple fact is it is the next step in the iteration of stuff for American Air. We have the F-15, we have the F-14, even an event vehicle, and also the F-16 and even the F-20 as a premium. We're running out of options for vehicles that they can add to the game, which wouldn't be the F-18. And I really wouldn't be surprised if we see this vehicle in probably at least a few updates. December would be when I would personally like to see it. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to talk about why I think it is an incredible, powerful vehicle, and why when it comes to the game, there isn't going to be a lot to stop it. And that's because it fills a role that not many other nations really do. If you like these type of historical videos, let me know. And also, we'll be doing more of these looking forward at future vehicles that could be added to the game. The other part of it is if you do enjoy the videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Going to be putting in a lot of effort over the next few months, having a bit of fun, especially with War Thunder. The F-18 story starts very similarly to the F-16's. If you didn't know, there was this program in the US which was known as the Lightweight Fighter, basically technology evaluation program. They were looking for vehicles which could carry a lot of ordnance and also at the same time didn't cost as much to maintain. Because before this, the F-15 Eagle was built, and the F-15 was a groundbreaking aircraft. It took over the world. There wasn't anything that could kind of touch it. This was a vehicle that was insane compared to everything else that came before it, and basically stamped America as the air superiority nation of the modern era. The problem with the F-15, though, is it's huge, and because it's huge, it's expensive, not just to produce, but also to maintain. And this meant, for many combat roles, especially stuff which was more navalized, it wasn't going to be that useful. So with the Lightweight Fighter Technology Evaluation Program, the whole point of it was to create vehicles which were a lot lighter, a lot easier to maintain, and also designed for other combat roles that the F-15 wasn't doing. This is where stuff like the F-16 came from, and also even the F-18. There was a competition, and Northrop put forward the YF-17. Now, the YF-17 is the Cobra. It is technically the prototype of what eventually became the F-18, but what's interesting about it is it actually lost the Lightweight Fighter Technology Evaluation Program. It lost it to the F-16, which obviously went on to be used by the Army, but the Navy were interested in the YF-17. The reason for this is because it had two engines instead of one. They didn't like the idea of only having one engine, which could obviously kind of fall apart and then cause a few issues. Instead, having two, so if one died out or if there was issues, it would still be able to get back to the carriers. So there was also a bunch of other factors that were really nice about it that they preferred, but mainly it meant that they had an option. The YF-17 was actually powered by the General Electric YJ-101. These are the G100 turbojet engines as well. Afterburning, of course, meaning that this vehicle, since it was light, could reach ridiculous speeds, nearly Mach 2 capable, and could fly around at ridiculous setups. This was one of the huge things that actually propelled this vehicle forward to becoming the great F-18, which isn't really one which even gets touched from an air point of view. So the engines themselves, the YJ-101s, were eventually modified into the General Electric 404s, which is what the F-18 was based on. If you actually have a look at the YF-17, it would be kind of an interesting vehicle to have in the game because its armaments were super limited, because it was a prototype. It was just designed to kind of show what could happen with the size of the machine and also what to do. But if you compare the YF-17 by its general silhouette and compare it to the FA-18, which, or at least the early variants, it looks exactly the same, because the vehicle was obviously developed off it. Another part of the history of how the FA-18 came about is the vehicles that it was designed to replace. One of the sets of vehicles that the Navy specifically was looking to replace was stuff like the A-4, the Skyhawk, and also the A-7 Corsair II, and its Phantoms, and to also complement its F-14 series, which it was using at the time. Now, you know how we talked about before, how the F-15 was a vehicle that was around and was used heavily by the Air Force? Well, they even tried to create a navalized version of the F-15 to fill out the role, and guess what? It was really expensive again, so that was a non-starter. But what happened with the FA-18 after it was picked, after the YF-17 was really liked by the naval side of the American Armed Forces, is it just began taking over a lot of the roles that the Marines and also the Navy were using. So the vehicle became, instead of just a lightweight air superiority fighter, like stuff like the early F-16s and also the prototype, the YF-17, it became a vehicle that was very much multi-role. So this vehicle went from just a standard air superiority fighter to an everything fighter, and that's because of the vehicles that it had to replace. It had to replace all types of different vehicles which we use for all different types of roles, and the vehicle did that exceedingly well. The platform that they had picked, the YF-17, turns out it was very good at what they needed it to do, and that meant it was easy for them to push forward. With the improved engines that they used on the machine, this helped it quite a lot as well. The General Electric F404GEs. Now, the F404 is an engine you will hear a lot about. In War Thunder, actually, we already have a version of it, which is on the F-20 Tiger Shark. But the F404 is on a bunch of other stuff too, including even a prototype of the Rafale from Dassault, which is quite fun. But the other plane, which everybody will know, that has a version of the F404 is the F-117, of all things, which I think is kind of cool. But it became a mainstay with the FA-18, especially with its later models, and that made it incredibly powerful. Other parts of the FA-18 that brought it into this multi-role status was the fact that it could carry all types of ammunition and all types of ordnance, which helped it out in so many ways. The main offensive armament of it, if you want to call it that, was of course the 20mm Vulcan. This is a standard for pretty much every American aircraft of the modern era, and it has access to a bunch of different hardpoints too, which can carry pretty much whatever you want. There are different variants of the FA-18 which are designated to carry different things. Of course, stuff like the original FA-18 couldn't carry some more of the developed weapons of others. One of the big differences between the A specifically, which is the original single-seat version which was put into the naval forces, compared to the C variant, is the A could carry stuff like the Walleye, the Harm, the AGM-65, and also the AGM-84, whereas the C opened up its kind of munitions even more, adding the AIM-120 AMRAAM, the AGM-84E SLAM, and also IR-guided versions of the Maverick. And then later on you had even bigger variants which would be able to be designed for different roles. This vehicle was able, by the end of its service, to carry everything before it eventually morphed into the Super Hornet, which is also used by the naval forces of America. But the standard Hornet could carry so much on pretty much all of its hard points. Whether you needed to do an air mission, you could bring along Sparrows, AMRAAMs, Sidewinders. Whether you needed to do a ground attack mission, you could bring along Mavericks, anti-radiation missiles in the form of HARMs, or even just standoff missiles, which are things I'm super worried about in the game when it comes to War Thunder. Or you could do the good old anti-ship stuff as well, since it could carry the Harpoon. This vehicle even can carry stuff like nuclear bombs. It can carry anything that you want, even stuff like ECM pods and additional countermeasures to go around with it. So this vehicle really is the cream of its crop. And guess what? It was introduced into service in the 1980s, and its first flight was in the 1970s. This aircraft is nearly 50 years old and really doesn't have a competitor when it comes to its role in its naval version. Now, the only competitor I suppose it really has is once again from America, and it is the Super Hornet, which eventually replaced it. But it's crazy to think about how prolific this vehicle was. Now, the crazy thing about the Hornet is not obviously just the vehicle itself, it's also its backup crew, which is something you won't really see when it comes to War Thunder. The actual naval arm of the American forces is insanely strong, and gives this thing a platform to pretty much do what it wants. And the crazy thing about it, at least for me, is the fact that it has to be a naval carrier aircraft, and that means its size is not actually that big. The vehicle is slightly bigger than an F-16, and I really mean slightly. The length of it is 56 foot, and the F-16 is only about 50 foot, and the wingspan is slightly bigger, 6 foot more. But this thing can carry a ridiculous amount of ordnance and still is not exactly huge. It's pretty interesting to actually see the FA-18 in general person if you ever get the opportunity, because with all of its capabilities and its general like kind of standards behind it, it isn't massive. It's actually pretty tiny. And when you compare that to things like the F-14 or the F-15, you can understand why the Navy went for it, to be able to once again fit as many as they can on an aircraft carrier, but also at the same time be able to use the vehicle in all different combat roles. It kind of shows you how efficiency at the end of the day always wins the game. The vehicle also has a very, very powerful radar on it, the huge APG-73, which basically is an upgrade to the APG-65, and the APG-65 was an all-weather multimode airborne radar system setup for the FA-18. It's a pulse Doppler radar, so it'll be able to use pretty much anything that it wants. The Americans were incredibly ahead when it came to their radar technologies, and that meant that this should be incredibly powerful. The APG-73 was used on the later Hornets, whereas the earlier ones got the 65, and overall, whatever happens, both of them are going to be really powerful. So why is it the FA-18 has no match? Well, it could be down to the logistical stuff, where the fact that, you know, no naval force really comes even close to America's when it comes to the world. But also, at the same time, at least in War Thunder, it's because you don't get these types of multi-role vehicles from other nations. When you even have a look at the leak list that happened, you have stuff like the Su-33, a vehicle which only they made approximately 20, and also don't really have too many carriers to use it on. For China, of course, you have some vehicles that were developed in the early 2000s, which are basically, you know, 20 years after the Hornet came into service, which is just crazy to think about. They made so many Hornets as well, 1,500 of them in total. And then when you even look at somewhere like France, where once again, didn't really have anything that was even close to it until the 90s or early 2000s. It's really insane when you actually think about how far ahead America was at that time. And in War Thunder, the real big thing that's going to be nice about the FA-18 is it's not going to be the best at every role out there, but no matter what situation you're in, you are going to be able to do anything. Close air support, Easy. Air interdiction? Easy. You could do some seed stuff, since they're bringing in those radars now. You can escort, a bunch of planes going in. You can do some air defense stuff. You can set it up in any way you want. And when you have a look at pretty much every other nation out there, they can't do the same thing. And that's why the F-18 is so dangerous, and why so many people are looking forward to it. There is a distinct possibility that this vehicle breaks the game in a huge way, because there is nothing that it does badly. And even stuff like the F-15 in War Thunder has its issues in terms of certain ways that you play. The F-18 would be super maneuverable, it would be very fast, and it would have whatever munition suite you would ever want from any vehicle in War Thunder. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.